I want to do everything, to have one way of evaluating experience. Does it cause me pleasure or pain?
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, this week we're going to talk about two powerful productions off Broadway in New York City.
And they are?
Coming up in a minute, we're going to have David Malloy and Rachel Chavkin from Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. But first, we are going to talk about Sontag, Reborn, a portrait of the important cultural essayist, Susan Sontag.
I thought you were going to say Sondheim Reborn there.
I've been saying that. I've been saying that.
Sondheim Reborn.
Which I'm going to say that
But you know what, Stephen Sondheim is in a way the Susan Sontag of the American musical theater, because he was the true, ladies, was he not? He was the intellectual of the American musical theater, as Susan Sontag was a popular intellectual.
Right.
My hat's
could
off to you,
I
darling.
buy that.
No, but we could say that she brought intellectualism into the mainstream.
Well, perhaps
American
our
culture.
guests will say that, and they are Marianne Weems, who is the director of Sontag Reborn. Marianne is the artistic director of the Builders Association, which is really a very celebrated experimental avant-garde. I shouldn't say avant-garde. John Simon says once you say something's avant-garde, it's not. But avant-garde theater company, which she founded in, 1994?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
She directed it. And here with us is also Mo Angelos, who adapted Susan Sondheim's journals for Sontag
Susan
Reborn.
Sondheim, I think you just said.
Did I?
She did. It's all right.
Well, that's okay. You know it. You know, viewers, I mean Susan Sontag. And she also plays Susan Sontag in a remarkable performance we will discuss. Mo is a founding member of the nationally famous Five Lesbian Brothers, and she has been a member of the Builders Association since the year 2000.
But she's
All
without
right.
that white streak, the famous Sontag white streak in your hair.
Didn't bring it today.
But before Michael goes wild on his affection for Sontag Reborn, I want to say that some of the young adults in this office, where I work here at CUNY TV, do not know who Susan Sontag is. So I want you, Mo, please, to bring them up to speed on what is the importance of Susan Sontag. Who was she?
Susan Sontag was a cultural critic, essayist, novelist, filmmaker. She actually wrote a few plays, too. She, let's see, I guess came to prominence in the early 60s with, I guess, her first big essay was Notes on Camp.
And she was 31 at the time.
She was 31 years old. It was published in the Partisan Review, which was a small review with probably a circulation of 10,000 or something like that, and it shot her to fame, cultural icon status.
Superstardom of cultural fame.
What was it about that essay? Because that is probably her most famous essay, Notes on Camp. What, Mo and Marianne, what is in that essay, which I'm sure you guys have studied, that would have attracted the attention of the mainstream media to this little partisan magazine that she wrote? What did she tap into that made her the most famous intellectual of her time, do you think?
Well, if I may. I think that the point is she tapped into something that was a kind of a cultural zeitgeist, like a moment that was about to happen, which was
Gay culture.
gay culture.
Yeah.
The humor, the, tragedy, the whole 9 yards, and that this was kind of her thing over and over again, is that she identified these cultural popular moments and then elevated them into high culture status. And that was her real, intellectual capacity, and her ability was that she could traverse both those worlds, high and low.
Well, because with the Camp essay, she is taking what you would think is like sort of, people who are impersonating Judy Garland or an obsession with Judy Garland or something. And she's elevating it to a kind of cultural status level. That these are people who have a knowledge of this subterranean world that is a great world.
Right.
That have never really been
Appreciate.
looked at other than as freaks.
Yeah.
And
that
she's
they have.
she's giving them their due. Would you?
Right. I mean, it's a little hard now in our current 2013 world to imagine gay culture being very not in the mainstream because it is so saturated in the mainstream.
Did you
now.
see the Tony Awards?
Yeah, exactly. So, but there was a time in olden times, which is not that long ago actually, where, you know, camp was a sensibility, as she outlined it, that was, everyone sort of understood when something was campy, but they didn't necessarily have a name for it.
Right.
You know, and she sort of pointed to it and said, this is the name for this thing.
Right.
What's so fascinating is you're portraying Susan Sontag when she was, from the time she was 14 through her adolescence and young, in her 20s, and writing these journals and discussing her reading, which was so instrumental.
Absolutely.
And then you're also portraying old Susan Sontag, old Susan Sontag. Thanks a lot.
Let me take over here.
I'm going to stab you with my pen
me take over.
just to be
Let me
candid.
ask you this.
Side by Sontag.
This is very interesting. So just tell us, she's 14 years old. What's the family like? What's the background like? And
Yeah.
why do books become the most important thing in her life?
Well, she does not come from an intellectual family at all. Her father, well, her stepfather actually, Nathan Sontag, was a decorated Air Force pilot who her mother remarried. Her mother Judith, no, that's her sister. Her mother Mildred remarried Nathan Sontag after her biological father died of tuberculosis when she was 5 years old. So she ended up in Southern California at North Hollywood High, which she says in the play, childhood, a terrible waste of time. You know, she just could not wait to grow up and get away and have her own life. And books taught her how to be an adult, in a certain way, right? She studied them, I think.
What were the early books that you read?
Oh my God, what did she not read?
She was voracious and continued that throughout her life, just thousands and thousands. I mean, she would read anything. And that was sort of her point, was that she could read book catalogs and magazines and...
Well, you knew her. How fast did she read?
I don't think she was a speed reader. She was just obsessive. Yeah. But in any case, she read high culture. She read everything. She read Proust and Gide and...
When she was a kid, she was
when she was
reading
a
Proust.
kid.
Dostoevsky.
When she
Yeah.
was 14, she was reading Dostoevsky and...
God, I was
Like,
reading,
it's like you.
I was reading Agatha Christie and Ian Fleming.
Right.
Two writers, I would argue, by the way, that you should read when you're young because they're great writers.
Yeah.
They teach you how to write a sentence
Fleming,
that's really
I'll buy that with Fleming.
muscular. And Agatha Christie's wonderful. I mean, and I bet you Susan Sontag would agree with me.
Well,
she
I
probably
think
would
that
appreciate Agatha Christie.
muscular is an excellent word because she was building that muscle. And, I think that was the thing, and something that's traced through the whole show is her aspiration to be a writer was,
And her
paramount through
intellectual
whole life.
confidence.
Yes, she was oddly confident. But she was. I mean, by the time she was 16, she was admitted at the University of Chicago, and passed into the graduate school. She tested out of undergrad. So she was... she was intelligent, but beyond that, she had this will to write.
But you knew her, right?
I did.
When did you first meet her?
I met her in 1990. I was the dramaturg at the Worcester Group. I was raised by wolves at the Worcester Group. Yeah. And long story, Ron Vaughter, who was a brilliant actor in that time, was a friend of hers, and she approached Ron and I about making a show together, and so we dove in, and we used to hang out in her penthouse in London Terrace and kick around ideas, and it was...
I love the intellectual with a penthouse in London.
Dude.
She probably rent controlled that. She paid 12.
Oh, listen, she had just... I met her at the height of her glory because she had just written The Volcano Lover. She had just gotten a MacArthur.
Right.
So that was why she was in.
And the MacArthur is a grant. You get $500,000 for being a genius.
Yeah.
But speaking of being a genius, I want to talk about your stunning production quickly.
Oh, thank you.
Where you have Mo, as the older Susan Sontag on a projection, and then Mo in real life is sitting there on the stage being young Susan Sontag, writing her journals, and the older Susan Sontag is annotating her text from the future. And then you have these gorgeous projections which have to do with the reading and what's going on. And it's like really like Sontag looking at Sontag looking at Sontag. It's a stunning production, visually gorgeous work as well as intellectually stunning work.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, we have incredible designers that we work with. Genius video designer and sound, and So it's an ensemble piece in that regard. I mean, there's one actor, but there's many, many players who create that world. You know, and the world is to reflect Susan's mind.
It's uncanny what you do up there on the stage.
But I want to go back to
Surprisingly effective, as the New York Times.
right. But right.
And they did.
I'm interested because I would like to have met her, and I think she's quite fascinating. You knew her, so you met her in 1990.
Yeah.
And was she intimidating? What was she like to be around?
It really depended on, you know, the many moods of Susan Sontag. I mean, she was extremely kind and generous if she liked you. So I was lucky enough to be in that ballpark. I mean, generous, you know, philosophically, with her time, conceptually, with her ideas, with talking about your ideas. But, you know, she could be very biting. And,
Really?
Yeah, and she didn't suffer fools. And, you know.
Were you ever around when she
Oh, my
sort of
God.
cut somebody?
Fabulous.
All right,
fabulous
give us an example of how she would cut somebody. I want to hear this.
Oh, I mean, there's a million. One tiny thing was we were at the Public going to a Godard film when they still showed films at the Public and when anyone cared about Godard. And a friend of V.S. Naipaul's came up, who I think she had just been on a panel with, and she just looked at the person and said, "Not now."
But you see, this is what I love about it. You bring up Naipaul. Naipaul, one of my favorite writers. Naipaul, Sontag, Gore Vidal. These people, as you
Fabulous.
said, they don't suffer fools gladly.
Yeah.
But they're not, they were not that aloof or that remote. If
Right.
they brought you in, they could be really kind of warm and wonderful. But if you came to them with pretension
Yes.
that they saw through right away, you would have your legs cut right out from under you. You'd the stiletto in the back, and you would not even have known that you've been carved up
Right.
and served.
It's
at a dinner
surgical.
party.
Surgical incisions. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you play her, do you play the soft side, or do you play the harder edge side?
I think you kind of get it all.
Yeah.
But you know, these are journals. They're deeply personal.
It's all from her journals, all
Yeah.
the text.
You worked with his son, with Sontag's son.
Yes, with
Yes,
David
David
Reef.
Reef.
I mean, he
Yeah.
we had
Worked
to-
with
Was,
SNE.
but you guys have studied the journals. Where is the insecurity in her? I mean, we think of her as this imperious, great
Yeah.
public intellectual.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's got to have been some insecurity, some
Sure.
doubt, some self-doubt. Where is that?
At every page. She's
Yeah.
just writhing with insecurity, and kind of did until the end of her life. I mean, I think we all, you know, carry those struggles, but
And also
certainly
she
when she
was-
was 14,
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
excruciatingly, you know, aware of her lack of prowess.
And
Or
you have
inadequacy.
her coming into her homosexuality, which wasn't exactly accepted, as
Yeah.
you said before, at that time.
Yeah.
How did she deal, and when does that kick into place in the diaries?
Oh God, when she's 16.
She knows.
Well,
Is there
she-
a girl that she's in love with?
Oh yes.
Many, many girls.
Oh yes. Who? One of them is Irene Fornés, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah.
Marie, I remember some play called Mud that Irina Fornés did
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. Theater for the New City. Yeah.
So did Sontag only go for the intellectual, avant-garde types, or did she ever go for
Yeah.
the cheerleaders?
No. No, she never went for a
She never
cheerleader.
went
for
the
No,
cheerleaders.
no.
Never went for the socias. No.
No. I mean, I think Annie Leibovitz was like a big step into the popular world for her. That's probably the biggest step.
The hottest babe. All right.
All right, we've got to wrap it up, but I have to ask you one last thing about Susan Sontag. Do you think, having looked at her diaries, looked at her writing, is it going to last? Or will you just remember her as the intellectual with the white streak in her hair? Is the writing good enough, or did she in some way sell herself out and become almost too popular?
Oh God. Well, I think, you know, on photography, for instance, which is her collection of essays looking at how photography fits into our culture, how image capture and, you know, image consumption works in our culture, is still very fresh and vibrant, and it's still very widely taught in colleges. I think that will have, you know, have some legs, as we say in the theater.
And Marianne, what do you think about the novels?
I think Volcano Lover was the culmination of her ambitions and also her ability to create fiction. I mean, it is a spectacular read. And I think it will live on, absolutely. And, you know, she I mean, some of the ones before that are shaky, but she needed to do those to get to where she was. So, yeah, I think that's one of the top 100.
Yeah. And did she try to write some plays? Didn't she?
Yes.
Yes, she wrote a play called Alice in Bed that Ivo van Hove directed at New York Theater Workshop, actually.
It was at ART too.
Nobody loved it. I mean, it's brilliant. It is about Alice James, and it's
Yeah.
about how she took to her bed for 20 years,
Yeah.
which is full of, promise. But and I
Listen,
think
if-
it's okay. It's very, very abstract.
Well, listen, if Bette Midler can do Sue Mengers just taking to her couch for 90 minutes, you can have Alice James taking to her bed for 90 minutes.
Maybe they should have cast Bed.
No, Jane,
When-
what's her name played it, right?
Yeah, Joan.
Oh, I hate to
Joan
break it to you, Mo,
McIntosh.
but when they move this play to Broadway, you're being replaced by Bette Midler as Susan Sontag.
Oh, please go ahead, darling. My pleasure.
out.
Throw in a couple of numbers. I think it'll
that's
pick it right up.
Yeah, right, okay. Susan Sontag, the musical, coming to Broadway soon enough.
Sontag on Sondheim. That's what we're
Oh, that's
next.
good. That's good. That's good. All right. So, all right. Mo Angelis.
Yes.
And Marianne Weems, thank you very much for being our guest on Theater Talk. The play is
Sontag Reborn,
at the theater.
New York Theater Workshop
Yes.
on East 4th Street.
Moving to Broadway with Bette Midler.
We hope so, but with Mo Angelos. All right.
Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for having us.